So as you were saying, we're going to talk a little bit about the B.O.S.S unit.
A little bit.
And then we're going to go off the rail and just not bore everybody.
Correct. So we're going to talk a little bit of the B.O.S.S unit, and then we're going to talk about somebody trying to join a militia.
That's milsim.
Yeah. And then, man, we're going to do live stream viewer questions if they want to ask questions. If not, we'll just talk about random shit, man.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
So, Anthony, you've been working on some B.O.S.S unit trigger stuff.
I have. So when it comes to the Kythera engine, which is all mechanical and doesn't have a circuit for you to connect the B.O.S.S cable to, I came up with a drop-in solution. It's at the point now where I feel like I can just sell this as a complete harness. It's a 3D printed housing that holds the micro switch, and that fits in the gearbox shell where the bearings would normally go. So it puts it in a specific spot, and the position of the switch can actually be tuned. There's a couple grub screws in there that'll help you fix the switch into the right spot. Because when you tune a Kythera, the position of the trigger link might be different depending on how you like your trigger. So there's some adjustability there. Otherwise, the whole harness part, pre-soldered, pre-wired, you're going to have a JST cable come out through the grip of your gun. And then the B.O.S.S cable is going to route out through the front of your gearbox the way it normally would for any front wired gun. And for the sake of a VFC, at the very least, there's a nice little gap between that upper and lower receiver where the pin goes, and that's the place where you'd route that cable. So now, when you have the Kythera and you have the switch, the only difference now with you using your Kythera is that now when you want to use the B.O.S.S unit, you could plug a small HPA LiPo into that JST connector.
How long does that battery last?
For the B.O.S.S unit, this battery lasts a ridiculously long time. This is like all you really need. You'll get multiple days.
So I've been using that pretty hardcore. You're going to get about 2 days of play out of the B.O.S.S unit with that. I would still charge it every day you're going to play with it, but I have yet to destroy one of those JST LiPos from using the B.O.S.S system. And we drained it all the way to zero. We saw what happened last Sunday with it.
Hey, so if you're going to do a 40-hour event, you need just 2 batteries?
I would bring 2.
Yeah.
So that's just the Kythera. I'm going to put the little USB switch in here.
Watch as all my mics peak.
Yeah, all the mics are going to peak. Let me just...
Ooh, yeah, because you haven't lubed that.
I have not lubricated this in a while.
Yeah.
I have not lubricated this in a while. This actually sat in my car for 2 weeks.
You also may need to adjust your gas. I had to do that today.
There you go.
So it's that simple. When you have your gearbox open and you put your Kythera engine in there, you just pop that switch in the holes for the bearings, or rather the housing, and then you just adjust the position of the switch. There's a little bit of back and forth trial and error so you get the switch in the right spot. But what happens is it's a switch that clicks. When the trigger is not pulled yet and the gun's ready to fire, it's actually pressing the switch. And when the switch is released, that's when it sends a signal to the B.O.S.S unit. Now, if you put this in your Kythera, you want the firmware update on the B.O.S.S unit to use the semi-auto mode. That way, when you hold the trigger after that semi-auto shot, the B.O.S.S unit also knows to stop firing. Mine doesn't have that firmware update. Jordan's does. So on my gun, I can hold the trigger after that semi-auto shot, and the B.O.S.S unit will still continue to fire. If you don't want to do the firmware update because you want that versatility.
No, they can't. It's going to ship with the latest firmware.
Yeah, well, you still have to connect it to the computer to put it into semi-auto mode.
Yes, that you do have to do.
So if you don't want to, don't worry about it. But if you want it to truly be semi-auto only, you have to connect it to a computer, and it has to be a Windows computer.
Yep.
Yeah, that too.
We've learned that.
Yeah.
I have everything but.
iOS sucks.
We do have a viewer question about the B.O.S.S system already.
Yeah.
Can the B.O.S.S system be barrel mounted instead of using the bottom rail?
Ooh. We are working on that.
Yeah, so
we're working on that.
We have a metal barrel mount for the rear assembly. And we already have the front barrel clamp. Now we just have to test fit it and see if it does work. If it doesn't, then we have to explore the options of maybe trying a real one. If not, designing one and having one made. But
it would be very easy for me to 3D print the whole mount, the rear ring and the front latch that attaches on. The quickest and I guess crudest way to do it, it would look like every 3D printed part you've seen sold on Hop Up. it won't be like cleverly designed or anything. It'll use nuts and bolts to kind of clamp it on there, but it will work. If you want the aesthetic,
I don't trust it.
I trust it to be sturdy. I just don't trust it to look cool.
I don't know, man. That's a lot. So like the B.O.S. unit weighs 3.7 pounds. I don't know if I would trust hanging that off of a 3D printed mount.
3D FDM printers can make very usable parts. I mean, people are making firearms with FDM printers. It's really just about like the shape of the part, the filament you're using, and just how exactly are you going to mount it. So a really good way to make a clamp with 3D printed parts is to use a nut and a hex nut and a bolt, and you actually press fit the hex nut into one end of that clamp, and then you run a bolt through the other end, and that gives you a very sturdy fit. Just look up FGC9. Just look it up.
Yeah. I mean,
so gross.
You're not wrong,
so
but it's also like at the same time, me personally, I don't know if I would trust that. In the same way, I don't trust 3D printed night vision arms. Like the housings are fine, but the actual arm that articulates the nods, I wouldn't trust it.
I don't trust my 3D printed arm for my night vision. However, I've been running the same 3D printed arm for my PVS-14 for like 2 years at this point, probably. It's pretty sturdy, Again, the alternative to 3D printed barrel mount kit is Jordan does have that rear
metal assembly.
The main thing is we just want to make sure it lines up with the holes on top of the B.O.S. system. So on an M203, when you want to rail mount it or barrel mount it, the Riz rail adapter or that barrel mount is just held in with 2 screws, and that's pretty common amongst most M203s, like on the airsoft market.
Yeah.
So you can probably get some hardware from an airsoft M203 and get it to fit with very little modification. So that would be the rear portion. As for the front portion, I found a website that's actually selling those front clamps, the ones that latch over and lock in. I don't know if the website is like legit. It's like one of those like small.
So the front barrel mount, that's easier. The rear piece that attaches to the barrel or the rail, if you're still using the Picatinny rail adapter, that's the harder part. The first one we got was plastic. That one didn't fit. Yeah. The metal one, maybe after we're done here, we'll go try it real quick and see if the holes line up. Otherwise, we would have to either do the 3D printed route or design it fresh and see if we could have a metal CNC one made, which would drive the price up. But even then, like me personally, I would prefer it to be metal.
Yeah. So like there's a company called Exometry, and there's other similar companies like this. You can send them STL files, and they'll manufacture that part for you in different ways. So you can choose to have it CNC'd. You can choose to have it like MJF printed. You can choose for it to be injection molded. So, if it's something that seems to be like really desired by end users that get the B.O.S. unit, I'll totally design the right thing, print it, prototype it, and then when I have, the dimensions for it, I know it works, I can get CNC ones made. The cost isn't going to necessarily be cheap. When you're paying somebody else to CNC something,
especially
you're paying them to do it for you as a service. So
especially low volume stuff. You're not going to get 10,000 of them. You know what I mean?
No, we maybe need 30.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Like for that rear mount part, my guess based on quotes I've got from this website in the past, I'm pretty sure it would be like $30 to $50 to have them make that one part. That does not mean that the part I'll get will be in spec. And it's not because they're doing anything wrong. It's because when you're designing stuff in CAD and then you print it on a 3D printer, that 3D printer is going to have some tolerances. So it's going to be off spec from like the true dimensions that were programmed in the CAD. So when I'm making 3D printed parts, I'll print it, I'll see how it fits. And now I'm tweaking the dimensions based on what will actually come off of my printer. So I know that what I'm printing is going to fit. So now when you try to take that same file now it's optimized for your printer's tolerances and you give it to a machine shop that can machine with real precision, if they go solely based on the dimensions in the CAD program, you're probably going to get something that's off. So it'll take time for me to basically make that mount, to make that kit if I go that route. There'll be a lot of back and forth, waiting, lead times for them to make the part, ship it to me test it, me make tweaks, etc.
So what about the Polar Star and Jeftron?
So as far as the Polar Star goes, I spoke to Ben, the owner of Polar Star. and he was like all for it. I kind of told him what was going on. So the idea with the Polar Star is if you just have a Rev 3 FCU, I was just like, hey, why don't we just plug the BOSS unit directly into the accessory port? So every time the Polar Star engine fires, the BOSS unit fires. And right now it works, but with like one little quirk that Ben is actually working out. On full auto, it's flawless. Basically, when you pull the trigger, you're getting constant signal sent through this cable to the BOSS unit until you release the trigger, which again is fine on full auto. But this is also true for when you're on semi-auto. So when you're in semi-auto, similar to the Kythera, but kind of different, when you hold the trigger after that semi-auto shot, the BOSS unit will continue to fire on full auto. So Ben is currently working on a program change so that this accessory port knows when the FCU is in semi-auto, and it'll actually just send a short pulse of a signal instead of a constant signal. So
it's like a cutoff lever kind of.
Yeah. As far as how we're going to get those FCUs into the end user's hands, I don't know. I was told in the past by one of their tech support guys that Ben has given instructions to end users on how to flash the FCU and told them what equipment they have to buy to do it so that they can reprogram it themselves. So that might be what Ben does for me in this case. If that's the case, then anybody that has a BOSS and an FCU, once I know how to do it and I have the equipment, I can flash your FCU for you, or I can just buy FCUs and pre-flash them and then sell them as is. If he doesn't do that, if he just updates the firmware on all the Rev 3s moving forward for this sake, then
just need a new FCU.
Then just buy another FCU. And if he doesn't do that, I might have to just special order some from him and then resell them as such. So I don't know where that's going to go yet, but he was very confident that reprogramming it would be super easy. So we're almost there with Polar Star. With Jeftron, got an email chain started between Philip, the head tech of Jeftron, and Mark from RDX, who's their engineer. And they were just going back and forth talking about the BOSS unit specs. And I was the middleman. So every time there was like a suggestion or a change, I was like rewiring my Jeftron and testing it out. So we got it to a point where we know where we have to solder the cables, and Jeftron's going to have an update ready for that by the end of this month, he said. So by the end of August, hopefully we'll see that Jeftron's firmware update includes a BOSS mode.
And now, just to be clear, there's already a wiring diagram for Polar Stars that works.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
This is just making it easier by putting a JST connector or whatever.
Yeah.
Then plugging it right into your board.
Yeah.
So there's already a way to wire the Polar Star. It's just not, it's like this requires like no soldering and
This will be really fast because then you could just plug it right in.
Sure.
You could wire it directly into the trigger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen the diagram for it already, and it's pretty simple.
Yeah.
So,
but like for certain LMGs, where the FCU is right there, and somebody wants to put an M203 on an LMG for some reason.
Yeah.
Hey, we've seen it.
It was the first thing that came to mind. It was actually my curiosity. It wasn't like necessity from anybody that said, "Hey, try to just connect it directly to the FCU." That was just me thinking, "Ooh, that would be neat. That'd be very easy." So that's where we are with that.
Yeah. What about gas guns?
Gas guns. I've been working on the DAV. It's an acronym for the dating app version of the B.O.S.S. And the reason why it's the dating app version for the B.O.S.S unit is that there's no strings attached to your gun. It's all external. So here's a VFC lower. Basically, this is going to take the form of like an HRF style magwell and then a custom trigger guard. And what's going to happen is there's just going to be an external switch that is positioned, and you can tune the position of it based on the type of trigger you have, what the trigger pull looks like on your particular gun. So it's not going to be exclusive to gas guns. You can use it on a GBLS, you can use it on a Sistema, you can use it on just an AEG. The circuit, pretty much the same exact thing that I put in the Kythera unit. So there won't be select fire involved, unfortunately. But again, it's the dating app version. You don't get to have all the benefits of marriage when you're just dating, right?
Well, it's the unpaid version.
Yeah, this is the unpaid, the unpaid version. Yeah. So, So currently I'm just working on that. I just got the magwell down. It required me to basically take the HRF magwell design and just be like, all right, I have to reverse engineer this really quick. Not to steal their magwell and sell these cool flared magwells that are Anttech, because that's their design, that's their stuff, right? But really, this is really necessary to make the cable management neat. So this is one that fits on a GHK. The challenge in this is that all these different receivers between different companies that make gas guns, different companies that make AEGs, they have these different specs on their receivers. So, you got to kind of bear with me. I went with VFC because I had the receiver laying around and I had to make very subtle tweaks to it to get it to work on a GHK. So it does fit very snug and it installs just like the HRF magwell. Where you have these 2 roll pins that kind of align it, and then 2 screws that go into some metal threads that are melted into the plastic.
And now that's just to hide the wiring, right?
That's to hide the wiring, yeah. So the next change I'll make to the magwell is actually create a channel for the wiring to route through from the trigger guard. As for the trigger guard, today I just made the first really rough proof of concept, I guess, for the trigger guard. So it is going to be kind of thick. It will replace the original trigger guard, but this will house either the micro switch or the induction switch. I don't know which one I'm going to use yet. The micro switch is like trigger contacts. So once the 2 pieces of metal touch, you're conducting electricity. An induction switch completes the circuit when you touch it with a magnet or if you get a magnet close to it. So that is nice because it's really low profile. I can tuck it away very neatly, and I can probably also embed it into the printed part so that you won't even see it. But my concern with it is that if you have a really strong magnet next to your trigger guard for whatever reason, it will make the B.O.S. unit go off. So I'm actually starting with the micro switch first to see if I can make this neat. If it's too bulky and looks too gross, then I'll play around with the induction switch. And I have some ideas for how I can kind of insulate that magnetic field so that it's less prone to going off from outside things. But yeah, right now we just have a slot and we have this little micro switch, and the micro switch will be able to slide around all the way to the front and all the way to the back, and you can adjust its position. Right now I'm just checking the trigger guard dimensions, making sure I have the holes in the right spot, making sure it doesn't look gross and bulky. And then I'll start working on actually fixing the micro switch, cable management, and all of that. But then, yeah, you'll be able to use it with a gas gun if you're running CO2 or HPA. It's not recommended you shoot the B.O.S. unit if you're using propane or green gas because of fire hazards and such.
Yeah, because there's an actual explosion happening.
But how cool would it be if the whole gun exploded in your face?
Oh, for immersions? Oh, man.
Dude.
That's milsim right there.
Yeah, that's
I'm sorry, there's only one milsim. Sorry.
There's only one milsim.
I'm sorry.
There's only one. There's only one.
Even though getting dressed in camo is simulating mil.
So yeah, that's kind of what I've been working on with the B.O.S. unit. Otherwise, I haven't been playing much. I should also add with the dating app version, the battery is going to be stored in the B.O.S. unit itself. So when you take the plastic handguard off of the M203, that is the B.O.S. unit, there's actually this really nice gap. There's this nice empty space between the actual gas reservoir and this back wall by the trigger guard area. And you can fit an HPA LiPo in there. It's probably going to require the end user to Dremel a little tiny gap in their handguard so that they can route the wires out. There won't be 0 wires hanging out, because there never is 0 wires hanging out with the B.O.S. unit, because there is a cable coming out of your gun going into there. But it'll be neat. It'll be manageable. And it's going to allow you to put the B.O.S. unit on your gun without even taking your gun apart, which is very neat. So that way, if you're not completely sold on the B.O.S. unit, you want to test it out, but you don't want to pay Anttech a whole bunch of money to gut your gun and rewire it and then tell you, oh, well, your air nozzle's also bad too. We got to change that.
Yeah.
your air filter needs to be changed.
You got a unicorn in your cylinder. It's just jumping around, poking holes. They got to change that out.
Yeah. It'll be the quick free trial version. Now, you will run into the same problem as far as the semi-auto and full auto as you would with just the Kythera. So you can choose to make it just semi-only. A lot of airsofters might just opt for that because they're not allowed to go full auto on rifles in most places, in most cases. Or you can just kind of play with it, keep it on semi, but let the B.O.S. unit go full auto. Might get you yelled at by players who think you're going full auto, but there's immersions there. So it's going to be up to the end user how they want to do that. But it's just another option, really. I just want to see all the different ways we can get it attached to a bunch of different guns, because ultimately, I just want to play a game where there's like 20 people on each team with the boss unit, and it's just pure chaos. I just want to be a part of that.
It'll be dope.
Yep.
It'll be dope.
So that's all I got for the boss unit stuff right now.
Jeez, talk forever about the boss unit. Jeez,
Yeah.
we just said this isn't a boss unit commercial.
Yeah. Do we have any comments, Jordan?
There were some. I had to jump off for a second, so I'm gonna have to go over to your phone.